So what if all the recent chaos between the US, Israel, and Iran wasn't just a series of random escalations? What if, as some analysts are suggesting, we're actually watching a perfectly scripted performance? A high-stakes chess match designed from the start to rig global markets and completely redraw the map of world power. Let's dig into that idea.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First up, we'll look at this alleged wrestling match strategy. Then, we'll follow the money and see how it all connects back to Wall Street. After that, we'll compare two totally different infrastructure models, look at a really important historical parallel, and finally, we'll explore what our sources think the endgame is, a massive power shift toward the east.
All right, let's dive right into the core strategy that these sources claim is at play. They say it's a classic move, but one that's being used on a global stage with, well, potentially massive consequences.
Yeah, it's the classic good cop, bad cop routine. You've seen it in a million movies, right? The analysis here suggests Washington is playing the good cop, talking publicly about peace and calming things down. Meanwhile, Tel Aviv acts as the bad cop, carrying out the actual military moves. The whole point, according to this theory, is to create total confusion and keep everyone guessing.
And apparently, this whole pattern has become almost predictable. It kicks off with a social media post talking about a truce, and for a second, things seem to calm down. Then, just when you think you can breathe, boom, Israel strikes a key target. And afterwards, Washington acts all surprised, claiming they had no idea it was coming. The sources are calling it a fake tag team wrestling act, where it just looks like they're fighting, but they're secretly on the same team.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. This political theater seems to be directly tied to some huge and frankly predictable swings in the financial markets. According to this analysis, this isn't just about geopolitics. It's about making a ton of money.
Get this, a massive $580 million bet is placed on oil prices going up right before the president tweets about a truce. That tweet alone makes the market jump by $2 trillion. But then, just a little while later, Iran says, what truce? The Israeli strikes happen, and the market tanks, losing $1 trillion. Now, if you had insider knowledge, if you knew both the tweet and the denial were coming, well, you could make an absolute killing on the way up and then again on the way down.
So the big question is, who's cashing in on all this chaos? The sources point to a whole network of insiders. We're talking Wall Street traders who somehow know what's coming, political figures with skin in the game, and of course, defense contractors, whose stocks just love the sound of conflict. The analysis even suggests that tech figures like Elon Musk benefit, and it includes a pretty stark quote claiming that soldiers are basically being used as cannon fodder to protect the profits of this super-connected elite.
This conflict also brings up a fascinating clash between two completely different ways of thinking about national infrastructure. Really, it's a battle between a system that's built to break and one that's built to bend.
And this table just lays out the strategic difference perfectly. Iran's energy grid is like a spider web. It's decentralized with over 150 stations, all built and run by their own engineers. It's designed to take a hit. The Gulf states, on the other hand, have these massive, centralized, American-designed systems. Their desalination plants are a huge vulnerability, basically a kill switch. If there's a conflict and the foreign contractors who run everything pack up and leave, the whole system could just stop. And there'd be no one there who knows how to fix it. This whole playbook, the secret coordination, the public deception, the fight over a critical waterway, this isn't new. In fact, our sources argue that it's an almost perfect echo of a major turning point in history, the Suez Crisis back in 1956.
The parallel is, wow, it's pretty striking. In '56, Britain and France secretly got Israel to attack Egypt so they could jump in as peacekeepers and seize the Suez Canal. The whole thing blew up in their faces, it was a huge embarrassment, and it pretty much marked the end of the British Empire as a dominant power. The analysis we're looking at suggests that today, the US and Israel are running a very similar play over the Strait of Hormuz, and the potential outcome? It's just as big, the possible end of the American era in the Middle East.
And this quote from Patrick Hennington really just hits the nail on the head. It frames this whole situation not as just another regional skirmish, but as a potential turning point for the entire global order, just like Suez was all those years ago.
Okay, so if this really is the end of an era, then what comes next? Well, according to this analysis, the tectonic plates of global power and finance, they're already on the move.
This points to a huge shift in strategy. The goal isn't to just block the Strait of Hormuz anymore, it's to control it. In this scenario, Iran becomes the new gatekeeper, deciding who gets to pass through and on what terms. It means they can guarantee safe passage for allies, like the BRICS countries, while making things very difficult for their adversaries.
That is a direct challenge to the U.S. doctrine of freedom of navigation that's been in place for decades.
And you can bet that big money is paying close attention. As Western markets are seen as more and more unstable, driven by all this engineered chaos, global capital is reportedly looking for a safer place to land. The stability and growth in Asia and the BRICS nations start to look a lot more attractive, and that just speeds up the global economic rebalancing that was already happening.
But this geopolitical game seems to have some serious costs back at home, too. The sources point to polling that shows a 25-point collapse in support for the president among young men under 25. And this is the exact group that voted for an anti-war platform. When your own base feels betrayed like that, it really weakens your ability to keep a long-term conflict going. And that just eats away at your power on the world stage.
So all of this brings us to one last fundamental question. This whole conflict really forces us to rethink what power even means in the 21st century. Is it about the shock and awe of having the technology to strike first? Or is true power found in the deep, structural resilience that lets you take that hit, get back up, and just keep going? The answer to that question might just define the next chapter of our history.